With us today, we have Aaron. Hi, Aaron. And we've got Sean. Hey, Sean. I'm David. And Sean and myself, we're going to be co-hosts today, interviewing Aaron, who is the author of a really awesome Power Platform book, talking about a very popular subject about generative AI. So definitely welcome to the show, Aaron. If you could kind of help us with a little bit of introduction, introduce yourself, tell us anything that you want us to know before we get started.
My name is Aaron. Like many of you, I was born at an early age. I spent the last 10 years or so at Microsoft in various capacities, whether it was consulting services or sales or program management. After that, I was mainly focused on the Microsoft 365 platform, mainly around productivity solutions, a lot of identity work. Last year I moved into the partner space. And so now I am engaged with mostly public sector customers, helping customers adopt various Microsoft platform technologies, transition from on-premises to cloud, a lot of automation things, which is kind of where we ended up today.
Interesting. Well, very good, and definitely glad to have you here. So I know you have authored quite a few books. When we had talked the other day, you had mentioned that you've got, 13-ish books.
Something like that, yeah.
With the publisher Packet, who's actually the publisher for this particular book. But this one, plus you have another one that got released at the same time. But for this one in particular, what was some of the inspiration that led to, this particular?
So my publisher approached me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in writing a book on Power Platform?" It was, at the time, it was really focused. They were really trying to focus on Copilot. That was the really exciting things that was coming out of Redmond. At the time, Copilot was really, really new and a lot of exploratory for a lot of people. So I said, "Sure, I'd be excited to really dive into to some of those technologies." The real focus was stuff around ChatGPT. It was around Copilot and trying to figure out how to integrate those with various pieces of the Power Platform. What can we do to leverage all these new up and coming technologies and turn out workforce productivity solutions?
Excellent. Well, one of the things that this podcast, at least from the title, that it implies is, we're really talking about digital transformations and just transformations in general. From your experience and perspective, what do you think the impact of either generative AI into a low-code platform such as the Power Platform, or even just generative AI integrated into any, say, Microsoft Azure type style delivery or traditional React front end type thing? Like for those people that may be watching the podcast, they're probably thinking, how can I apply this to my business? Why should I do it? And so from your perspective, what is the impact to those industries that you have experience with?
Like I said earlier, a lot of my experience and focus is in the public sector area. So when I look at how things like generative AI can be used there, how we can extend these things, a lot of it is really the same types of answers you can say with any business. One of the most popular things that generative AI can do is like content summarization. That is fantastic. I think a really great way to make use of the data estate that you already have. So when you talk about things like organizations that have really extensive frequently asked questions databases or really extensive work instruction databases, one of the challenges that people face with search is keywords, is knowing how to find something that somebody else wrote. So when you're sitting there, I want to find a recipe on, blackberry pie. I might just type blackberry pie recipes. But if somebody spelled that wrong, right? If somebody spelled blackberry wrong, or somebody spelled pie wrong, or somebody spelled recipe wrong, your mileage may vary. And so a lot of search is really based on keywords and phrasing things exactly the way the author did. If you're not the author, though, sometimes it's good luck. Correct. So I think one of the really cool things that generative AI can do is kind of massage that data and figure out what you as the asker or questioner or querier are looking for, and then kind of match that up with the concepts that it infers from the content. So, if I said, blueberry pie or something instead, they might be like, hey, you know what? This guy's looking for pie. Maybe it's blackberry, maybe it's blueberry. Let's just go ahead and see if we can filter down the list of pie things. So when you're looking at, stepping back and pivoting towards, like work instructions or frequently asked questions or service desk knowledge, I think that's a really great jumping off point because it helps, take the load off of all of the phone a friend things that a lot of people normally do. They pick up the phone, they call the guy in the cube next to them or whatever it is. Hey, I'm looking for this doc. Can you help me find it? So now you have two people wasting their time looking for the same information. They're all structuring their queries differently. So generative AI, I think can really reduce some of that load. And I think that's one really great transformational use of being able to consume knowledge that's already there.
Yeah. And in the public sector, we see a lot of this with Google search, and everybody's used to doing that, but we're seeing search in general being redefined. Yes. And you hit on a particular topic that I'd like everybody watching or the video or the podcast live to understand, that it's really, at least in my experience and my humble opinion, is that being able to establish intention, it's really, really good at that, because that's essentially what behind the scenes and head geek programmatic type stuff, it's really designed to do. It's kind of, what is that next word? What is the definition or meaning of that? There's not maybe some sentient intelligence that we know of yet. Their AGI might change that, but as at least of right now, it's definitely good for figuring out intention. And
I 100% agree on that. Yeah, and that's I think you probably phrased it better than I did, but really looking towards that, figuring out the intention both of in like the search example, the intention of the writer and the intention of the person looking for information, and kind of matching those, and in the Venn diagram of technology, figuring out where those things overlap.
Yeah, Sean, you got a couple ideas on some of the examples that we've run across? You're muted, by the way. For some reason, you're muted. Good. I can read your lips, though. I think you said, "I'm sorry about that."
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, sort of. You're a little bit far away, but yeah, you're coming through. Let me see if I crank up your audio a little bit. All right, go ahead.
One of the questions I had was really about front office versus back office. When it comes to the Power Apps, I've heard a lot of people like, oh, well, that's a back office type experience, where I think you can have just as powerful as an impact in a front office or public experience. But there's a lot of confusion and myth and legend when it comes down to low code. Like, well, that's only for this, that's only for that. What has your experience been in dealing with some of those myths and legends with low code, no code?
So that's, it's really interesting. So, everybody wants things to be, especially people like me who are not programmers by trade, want things to be low code. I grew up in the, I grew up with Word. I grew up with Front Page. I grew up with a lot of WYSIWYG stuff, right? And so the ability to drag and drop things, or to be more visual with how I put together things is really important to me. One of the things that I do enjoy about a lot of Power Platform components and a lot of Power Platform stuff is it really gives you that iterative visual experience for putting stuff together. And but I think it's also important to note that that the low code experience has its limits. The more complicated your business process is, the more complicated your transformation goals are, the more likely you're going to need, you can't just drag and drop a bunch of components and voila. Eventually you're going to need to, break down an array. You're going to need to figure out how to extract a value from JSON. You're going to need to learn those, those things, at least tangentially, to be able to get to your end goal. I think, but that being said, I think low code is a great place for people to start. And I think at the end of the day, everybody doesn't need to be a pro developer. Just like, that's not really the focus of 98% of people's jobs, right? You're an HR professional. You're not a developer, but you need to figure out how to bring in some data, or you need to figure out how to automate some business process. You're an accountant. You might be an Excel wizard and really awesome with VBA, but but that doesn't make you a programmer. Connecting Azure AD, or I'm sorry, Entra ID. Those are totally different concepts, and you wouldn't be expected to know those things in your role. So I think the low code environment is fantastic because it helps people get to that level of business productivity without necessarily needing to be an expert, and they can always phone a friend to one of their better developer friends, or go look on like the Power Users platform community pages and find other people like them who are trying to work through the same types of issues. One of the exciting things to know about technology, and especially about this platform right now, is it's new to everybody, right? It's only a few years old, so everybody is kind of learning all together. It's really a shared experience of learning how to be transformative, and expanding on your low code capability.
Yeah, hey, WordPress, which has been around a minute, it has really showed that power of enabling, the non-developers to do transformational things. This is where, and David, I'd love for you to talk about your comments on the concept of citizen developers and that misnomer. But I think the power of Power Platform and low code, no code is really the enablement factor. And some people get confused that say we're going to make non-developers developers, and it just never rang true for me. David?
Yes, I definitely agree. From working with folks in the business, the way I explain it to people that are in the business, say in a particular department or department lead, I usually just ask them, how good are you at PowerPoint? And they tell me some degree of acceptability or shortfall of the skill set that's needed to run it, or some other item in between. The other thing I asked them is, how well do you use Excel? And are you enough of a power user to where you've ever written any type of formulas other than just the click and drag and drop on the menu bar? And if they answer anything other than I've never written a formula in my life, I'm like, well, you're a good candidate for the Power Platform, a citizen developer as it goes, to start your journey there. But if you're looking for an immediate outcome, you're going to struggle to meet those deadlines for sure. And the other way that I also have conversations also with, usually when they come up, they're in conjunction with other department leaders or business leaders. And I don't want to scare them away from the Power Platform, but the way I try to approach it, and going back to your earlier comment, Aaron, was that you talked about, not everything needs to be hard code. You can do a lot of stuff in the low code. And the way that I explain it to folks is like, if you're familiar with the Pareto principle, AKA 80-20 rule, then think of it this way. 80% of the heavy lift can be done typically by somebody with enough skills to power and drive low code. However, you're going to get to that point where that 20%, you're going to need your pro developers. The problem that this solves is the problem that you likely face right now is you're short staffed. You have a tremendous backlog. You need to knock stuff out as quickly as possible. And the question is, can you reduce the requirements enough to get to an MVP or minimum viable product? Yep. And if you can do that, conceptualize that, see that, find value and get some ROI based on the energy and the effort it's going to take to produce that outcome, then you can pretty much have your decision right then and there. Hey, is this something that's viable to do that? And going back to the earlier comment I made about somebody who's just starting their journey, this is where I mean, to be completely honest, I have a love-hate relationship with Copilot right now because it's so new. It's in an infancy. The potential is tremendous. But as it relates to Copilot writing the actual formula, like I just did something real simple the other day where I asked it to give me a row count back from SharePoint, and it wrote me a botched up formula. I know enough that, hey, it gave me the idea of what I need to do. It got me 80% of the way there. I was like, yes, but if you're completely novice and you're just like at face value, oh yeah, this is going to work. And then you get error after error after error. Like, it's frustrating. So it depends on where you're coming at perspective wise. If you're a seasoned Power Platform developer, you're looking for a solution or ideas on an approach, Copilot is awesome. But just know that it's still early, it's still in its infancy. And just like with all things that I've had experience with Microsoft, first generation, second generation releases of their products are innovative and great, but they got some rough edges. And
Right.
you just got to work through it. And as you get to 3, 4, and whatever, okay, GA for basically the mainstream. Aaron, what do you have to
Same. Yeah. I mean, and like you said, early iterations of Copilot. I mean, it's in its infancy. And I think that really stretches across the entire AI spectrum, right? Is that it can be really good for like 80% or 70% of the way, really good for idea generation, for prototyping, getting you really close. And in that idea of, that you had earlier of workload reduction. I mean, sometimes 80% is good enough, right? It's good enough to get you over the hump. You still might, you might not be able to figure out certain things, but if it can speed up your workday by half an hour or an hour, that gives you that breathing room. And then once you get some of those big rocks knocked out, maybe you can find a pro developer. You can go to a class. You can pick up a couple of books, and you can go back to your processes and say, hey, I'm now 3 months in, or I'm 6 months in. I've got some more experience. I've got some help, and I can go ahead and refine these and turn them from being something I cooked up in my basement to something that we might be able to transition to business operational.
And Aaron, I think David made a good question here that we all need to ask ourselves. What is a developer? With code gen capabilities, with low code, no code. I was at a wonderful event about Gen AI, and they talked about in 2025, the number one language for programming will be English, right? So, there's obviously lots of hype.
Right.
I find this technology is best for rapid prototyping.
Yep.
But do you foresee a future where you won't need the 20% power developers, or would those be called developers? It comes down to, where do you think the future lies in this?
Yeah. So I think, I think the term citizen developer, I think Microsoft is starting to move away from that, because I think, like a lot of things, it cheapens the word developer. And that's why they've kind of pivoted, I think, towards the word maker. So, on that continuum of knowledge and learning, anybody can make something, right? Just because I can, go down to the store and pick up a box of cake mix and bring it home and drop in a couple of tablespoons of oil and an egg, it doesn't make me a baker, right? And
YouTube certified, right?
Right. And if it messes up, like there's something wrong with the box mix. Mm-hmm. If it messes up, I don't necessarily have the skills to troubleshoot and figure out why it messed up. I'll probably just go back to the store and buy another box and try again. And after 4 or 5 failed ones, and I've spent like $84 on bake mixes, I'll just go down to the bakery section and buy a cake. And I think that's really the same thing when it comes to the developer landscape. I think the difference between a maker and a developer is that ability to actually discern what's working or what's not working, and that whole troubleshooting and iterative refinement process. I I'm not certain that that dragging and dropping controls makes you a developer, but it certainly makes you a maker, and and you shouldn't be limited by by your lack of professional skilling in one area to be able to contribute to your own productivity or the productivity of the business.
Well, I mean, it comes back to when you're making the experience, is it more important the technology you're using or the outcome
Yeah.
that you're looking for? Like many of the experiences that I know my clients are asking for, the outcome is actually data, especially in the Gen AI world. So, why wouldn't you want to expedite that or enable and do tenfold with a low code platform? So,
Yep.
what I'm seeing is Gen AI and low code is a superpower for rapid prototyping, rapid data acquisition, and surveying. And there's so many different use cases here. And then people get kind of really fixated on what is prim and what is proper when it comes down to code. When I tell us all before, hello world is code, right? Our clients don't pay us to do hello world. They pay us to give a business outcome that just
Right.
happens to be in software.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's definitely an important idea to hone in on. So when we think about what like you asked earlier, is there going to be a future, whether it's 2025 or beyond, of not needing that pro develop? I mean, the answer I think to that is no. For a number of reasons. First, I think it's going to take Gen AI and code Gen AI a long time to get there to a point where it can develop repeatable, reliable code. But the other part is, and call me old fashioned, fearing the robot apocalypse and being put in a people zoo. You definitely need to maintain skills to further enhance and develop. Otherwise, you just become a caretaker of a machine that you know nothing about. And that's from a business perspective, awful, because machines can't necessarily, at least at this point, can't innovate. They can't necessarily communicate human or business need to actual software requirements or actual application requirements. But also robbing people of the personal satisfaction of actually doing something skillful.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add from some of the things that I heard, I have at least an idea. Or a thought. I want to validate it against what you might think, Aaron. So if I look into this crystal ball that probably is quite hazy, but if I look into it, I try to see into the future. I see today's developers transitioning roles into more of a QA type of role. They're going to QA the code that the machine writes. The reason that the new modern day or futuristic QA role is going to change, because to be a QA person, you really first and foremost need to be a developer, because you need to know what the code does, how it works, and you're essentially QAing the machine at that point. So the role of the developer was going to change. It's going to be overtaken, I think, by AI. But the developer itself is still going to be needed. It just needs to then transition itself into a new version of what QA would be. And as this grows at scale, this is where the other part of the problem becomes. So if you can write that much code, now I have this huge QA fleet, because human centricity or human in the middle has to always be there to verify that what you're doing, because everybody wants to protect their business, no matter how well the machine does. If it does it 99.9% of the time, that one, I don't know what I just said, 0.01% chance that this thing screws up and does something in a really bad way and it damages the company in any way, nobody wants to take that risk. So I think that paranoia is always going to have the call for a human to be in the middle. What are your thoughts about the future evolution? I'm thinking probably 10, maybe even 15 years from now.
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate. I mean, that concept's going to force a lot of companies to bring back QA. I know that's not done in a lot of places now. Where they're letting customers be the QA. So I think that Yeah, but I think that's important, and that really goes back to I think what I said earlier is that we can't just be caretakers of these things. We have to understand, I mean, we can pitch to the code generation platforms what it is we're trying to accomplish, but in the end, only we can tell if it actually accomplished it, and it's still going to take a thorough understanding of sound development principles and and business knowledge to understand what has been produced and does it meet the requirements.
Yeah, I mean, I see a democratization happen with low code starting it, where it's giving power to the non-powerful in your word making instead of developing. And some of these tools I know, like Amazon announced Q, and
Right.
there's discussions of complete Gen AI created software. The problem is, yes, you'll be able to make something, but is it true, resilient, scalable, future-proof software?
And again, well, I would challenge anybody to make user-proof software. I think that's really the something that we're going to continue learning and seeing develop, and for lack of a better word, evolve. I mean, right now, they're really good at generating stuff that prints "Hello World," or really good at that. But especially going back and looking at secure design principles and making sure those are being followed. Making sure that boundary checks and parameter checking and validation, all of those things are actually happening. The way they should. Again, that's going to be that's going to continue to be necessary. I don't think we're going to have robots building robots anytime soon, autonomously. And like David said, we're always. I think for the foreseeable future, we are going to require human in the middle. But I think long term, as a race, we're also going to require human in the middle to make sure that that we're always achieving equitable and good results.
Yeah, I mean, I always make the comment. People are like, "Well, pretty soon AI is going to do everything," and I'm like, "Well, just so you know, the founder of OpenAI asked for $7 trillion to do the first version of AGI. Like, 7 trillion is a lot of money. So if you're expecting it to be tomorrow, we all need to realize that, this technology is evolutionary, not revolutionary.
Yeah,
we're incrementally adding our capabilities. We're not creating new levels of technology.
Yeah, I definitely think there's going to become a point where it's cost prohibitive. The amount of horsepower and energy that's required to produce that, and that in the end, I mean, I like David, my crystal ball is quite hazy. I don't particularly see a future where there's a good enough ROI to make that happen. And it'll eventually at some point be a diminishing return. But in the interim, I think exposing those technologies, especially in terms of the Power Platform and its low code environment, definitely makes it easier for all of us to get our jobs done at some level.
So if somebody's watching this and they want to kind of dig in and get started and play, because Sean had said earlier that Power Platform is really great for prototyping, and going through your book, you've got a pretty good layout. Maybe start talking about when you made the book, like talk about the layout, like where should people start in the book depending on their experience. And you have a couple of really great examples. Some of them in a business use case may not be so important, but there are other ones that are at least good launching or starting points for people to say, hey, listen, if I can do this, maybe I can adapt it in this interesting way. Because you were talking a little bit about search earlier, but those business use case are those key lessons that can help people go along their digital transformation journey, and how to use essentially your book as a tool to help do the discovery. Maybe they can have a conversation with their upstream management too about that as well.
Well, like any author, I prefer you start at the beginning of my book. But I think it's really important to understand, like at least at a foundational level, how you interact with a service, whether it's the AI builder components, that are native to the Power Platform, or if you're going to be sending stuff to an outside service, like you're just going to send it via an API call directly to ChatGPT. I think it's obviously, especially when we're working with Gen AI, the concepts of prompting are super important. So understanding how to be specific enough with your requests, so that you're getting reasonably predictable and consistent results. I think so for people who aren't familiar with any of it, I think going and spending some time with just with ChatGPT and asking some basic questions and learning how to ask questions is going to be super important to being able to take advantage of some of the other things in the book. I think one of the chapters, maybe it's like 3 or so, we're talking about actually talking to ChatGPT and looking at the structure of content that comes back. I think that's going to be really important for learning how to parse JSON, for example, how to extract values out of it. This book is definitely not a primer on everything you need to know about JSON. It's really just focused on how do I get the values out that I need to solve a particular problem. And so I think if you were going to skip around, that's probably a super important chapter, because you're kind of learning the structure and the format of how to ask things and how to get data back. And then when you do get data back, what's it look like? And how do I start manipulating it? I think that's pretty good. I mean, again, I think it's all pretty good, but
yeah, that's why you wrote it.
Right. I'm going to really try hard not to, injure myself, patting myself on the back. I would say, especially if you're new to these things, overall, I think in chapter 6, it's very similar to it. I feature some content about using some of the native AI builder things. So for, again, I guess maybe I should zoom back a little bit for people who aren't familiar with AI builder. It's actually technology that Microsoft has had in play for a number of years. It's definitely not new. And it is really Microsoft's first and second and maybe third gen passes at AI technologies in the Azure platform. And it was pulled into the Power Platform. There's the connectors are able to take your requests and then pass them back to other Azure AI services to generate responses and come back. So one of those examples, especially from like a business automation or productivity perspective, that I really liked is working with sentiment analysis, and I think that gives a really great experience on what the Power Platform built-in components can do from a pricing perspective. If you can leverage, sometimes if you can leverage stuff that's built into the platform, you end up, with a cheaper monthly bill. So I would always recommend, starting with the stuff that's in the box before you start purchasing extra services. And I think that's a really great way to experience, to really get a taste of what the Power Platform can do. So, a lot of people are familiar with the term managed by exception. So let's say you run a customer service organization. And you sell your widget 2000 or whatever, and inside the box that you ship with your widget 2000, you have like a little registration card and maybe an email address or something like support@widget2000.com or whatever you have, and that idea that people are going to send you hate mail, right, for your product not working or not working to their expectations. So I think that chapter in specific is, I think, a really good introduction, because it shows you how to use AI in a way that reduces, call volume that people have to answer. So if you can hook up a bot of some sort or a flow to a mailbox and just say, if somebody sends me a positive feedback, I don't want to necessarily ignore it, but I don't want to necessarily prioritize it either. The people we want to make happy are not the people that are already happy. We want to, if people are having bad customer experience, we want that to rise to the top of the inbox, and that way we can do something about it. So I think I think sentiment analysis is a great way to kind of highlight that automation capability, and kind of see what the Power Platform has to offer. Create a mailbox, create a flow that takes this mailbox input and says, is this positive, is it negative? And maybe you don't have to do anything with the positive stuff, but the negative stuff is really important for us as a business to do something with it. And paying somebody to sit there and watch an inbox might not be great. It might not be a great use of money. But having a bot watch it and then say, hey user, hey person in customer service, this customer said something kind of angry or kind of sad. Maybe this is something you should focus and follow up on. I think using AI, especially in that particular way, to enforce human connections is a really powerful tool. So I think if people were going to start, I think that's probably learn how ChatGPT does stuff, and then you could skip down to I think that's the first chapter where you're actually doing something productive to see how the platform works.
I think that's a great start, Sean, too, because some of the companies that that you and I work with and you and I deal with, and anybody even listening or watching this, if you're thinking about or have a customer or just a customer loyalty program, this is a great way to either start one or a great path to add some additional enhancements to it. And then it's so easy to get started that way, as well as then build from there additional maybe questions into that form that could help you with R&D. That, I mean, the sky's the limit, but get that first use case down, because that's the hardest part. Just getting something in place, having people see the value. Now you've got something tangible. You can go to senior management and say, hey, check this out. And then watch everybody's eyes light up and drop. Hey, well, what else can we do? And now the backlog begins.
Well, exactly. And then you make a great point there. I don't, connected to a user survey form or some sort of a registration form. So so when the user gets that product card in their widget box, they can scan a QR code and get redirected to a form, submit the form, and then you can use that to drive all sorts of events. And, if the customer has any initial feedback, you can capture it there for follow-up. Some other ideas that I had kind of kicked around and I think presented in that chapter as well. Like, let's say you get, a negative customer experience feedback. That's a great, you can, you could automate, connecting to, I don't know, maybe your CRM system, or connecting to, a payment gateway, or connecting to your sales, the sales end of your website, and, offer a free product, a discount on a future product, a partial refund. You can see and kind of use sentiment analysis and Gen AI to look at that and say, how angry is this customer? How much interaction do I need? Obviously, we want to focus on human interaction, but from a business perspective, high touch is also super expensive. So if you can offer a partial refund, for a few bucks or something, or a discount, that's a lot cheaper than an angry customer. And it's a lot cheaper than having somebody, full-time manage an inbox. And I think showing those types of experiences to an organization, or those type of capabilities, like you said, it really just lights up all of the potential and possibility around, what AI and the Power Platform can do.
Yeah.
What are some of the innovative ideas that? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sean.
No, I mean, I tell clients all the time, stage 0 is education, right? If you're gonna go and move to Greece, you better start learning Greek, right? So, this is where your book, prompting training that I know we've done for clients, educating people on, look, you need to not only be literate, you need to be quite driven to really understand this technology, because it's an iceberg. Everybody can go in and type hello world and create a script that does hello world. But, when they start creating new delightful experiences like you're talking about, that's really where the power comes from.
Right.
And it all starts with education.
Yep.
David?
Yeah. No, I was just going to ask, so based on some of the examples that you have in your book, companies are always looking to innovate. What innovation ideas, as the author of the examples that you give, that you would hope that people might take and hopefully get those creative juices going and flowing and say, hey, I could do this, or maybe I could do that. And I know you also had some other parallel books too that you've got out there, but ultimately you're kind of hoping to plant the seed for them to kind of grow and move something forward for their company.
I think so. There's a chapter that I explore using AI vision services for like tagging images in a SharePoint library. A lot of organizations have a lot of like digital assets, and especially organizations that have been involved with technology for a long time. They tend to have a lot of digital assets and generally poorly organized. And again, it is expensive from the human capital perspective to pay somebody to look at all of these images and write a description. I mean, if you're a marketing company or you're a product development company or you're really any type of company that has a huge digital asset library, you have those assets for a reason. It usually isn't just to consume hard drive space. You captured those assets with the intent of at some point in the future reusing them. You took a picture of this event because you want to be able to use it in a marketing context. You took a picture of the construction process of a house or a building because you want your construction company to have stuff they can use in promotional materials. You took pictures of public service events or community events because you want to be able to turn around and use those in other marketing things to say, hey, we're involved in the community. But if you have all that stuff just in a giant folder, that's not indexed, that it's really hard for you to capitalize on all this work you've already done. So, I think that's that's something cool. I think that's a good example of, starting, you can use, and again, that example is how can I just tag a bunch of images in a library using computer vision? But it can extend past that. My example right here is just in marketing, but it could extend past that into, maybe you use that as a first pass to, let's say you're a manufacturer of, again, the widget 2000, because it's my favorite widget of all of them. And
for 3,000,
right? Well, that's the upgrade. That's that one's coming next year. But maybe you have customers sending them back for repairs for whatever reason, and you take pictures of that repair process, so you can train your vision model to analyze those, and then you could use those in FAQs that you that you present on your website to a customer, so they can do self troubleshooting, or just like any concepts like that where you can adapt whatever I've taken. I think those are amazing. It's just really limited to your own creativity of what else could I apply that to. There's so one of the other ones I really like. As a consultant, I've spent a lot of my life writing statements of work, and and most organizations have we might have like boilerplate templates for what we want to do. But every project you engage on is at some level functionally different. I mean, you might have like a lot of shared components, a lot of table stakes stuff you have to get out of the way before you can do your custom part. And but when I write a statement of work for a customer, I mean, those things can be 30, 40 pages long. When I write a report for a customer, here's a project deliverable that is, the build of your entire environment. Here's this application lifecycle program that we put in place. Here is, a business process for onboarding and offboarding people to, Office 365. Whatever those business processes are, a lot of times those result, if you're in the consulting world, those result in massive documents, sometimes pages long. But something that's always required in any of those, if you've been writing these for any amount of time, is the executive summary, which is, after you've already written 200 pages, your eyes are glossed over. You're like, man, I don't remember what's important or what's not. So I provide an example in there that I think is really practical. And Sean, you talked earlier about, stuff that's either front office or back office. I mean, this is something that, as a frontline delivery person in an organization, if you're responsible for generating, all of these documents, the last thing you want to sit there and try to do is figure out what's important in a document. But that's usually what an executive summary is trying to hit the highlights of what you're accomplishing or what you're proposing. So Gen AI is a great tool for content summarization, and it can read a couple hundred pages pretty fast, and focus on and try to highlight keywords or key phrases. And like anything, it's always important to have that that human review aspect. But if it spends 2 minutes reading your 100-page document and generating a 1-page summary, that's just 5 or 10 minutes you might have to spend tweaking or reviewing or updating, as opposed to 5 hours rereading.
Yeah. I remember a meme that is just so accurate. Hey, I spent 3 weeks writing a 100-page document, and sends it, and they load it into ChatGPT to read the single paragraph summarization and said, "Good job."
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, as a frontline person, I think that's a fantastic use, and a really business enabling productive use.
Yeah, I mean, again, the future kind of lies on how people communicate and interact, and more importantly, to your point, delight. Right? That's what a lot of our clients that I talk to regularly, they're trying to do, is they're trying to delight their customers. And whether it be software, hardware, I've done some IoT projects, it comes down to what kind of impact can we make for what ROI? And, you could call it a Konami code, but at the end of the day is the power of Gen AI and Power Apps together, right, really does give you that cheat code in new next generation experiences that people probably don't even know that's possible. So how much do you hear from people, on Power Apps like, hey, I didn't know that was possible. I know, some of the things that David has made with Power Apps, we've shown to people, and they're like, wow, I didn't even know that was possible. How long did it take? And he's like, well, it took about a week. They're like, how did that happen? Right.
So last week I just did something quick for a customer. They were looking for, they were looking for some sort of a status reporting system for their Microsoft 365 tenant. And we all know how to log in, navigate to the admin center, drill down into the service health and dashboard and look at everything. Right. For administrators, that's something that's pretty easy to do. How do you communicate that to a VP or a CIO? Mm-hmm. You can't. I mean, like, here, we're gonna assign you this service administrator role. You can log in and all you have to do is log into this particular website. Click these 9 different links, and no, we want red, yellow, green, right? So I created a SharePoint list and added a handful of columns and a Power Automate flow that connects to this to the service to Graph, and pulls out the most recent service entry for every service, and then what the current service health is, if it's service restored or service degraded or service operational, and just assign all those a color. So now they have a gallery view SharePoint list. You can send a link to an executive and say, click this link and just hit refresh. And they get red, yellow, green for every service in the tenant. Much easier. Yep. I mean, it took like I don't know, it took like a day to kind of explore the JSON output of the service health dashboard and figure out how to turn it into something useful. Is it an amazing product? No. Is it? But does it solve a particular business need rather than if the executive has that that itch to scratch for how do I know what's going on? Absolutely.
And what I tell people is that kind of use case would never be solved, right? Because the juice wasn't worth the squeeze.
Yep.
Right. And so when a lot of people are like, hey, these technologies are going to impact our ability to do development work for clients. And I tell them, no, it's just the opposite. Because all of a sudden, things that were not practically from a business sense automatically become practical.
Yeah.
So, and whatever work you do, you're just getting much more value, much more quicker. And, the same budgets, I mean, as many people lament the lowering of budgets, they're not evaporating, right? And if you could generate more business value, that's better stewardship for the business. That's better opportunity for bigger budgets in the future, not lower.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you, Aaron, to turn your brain into a GPT. If we were to summarize our entire conversation of everything that we kind of mentioned here, and what are some good key takeaways you think for folks to go away with, and then, where should they go to kind of, besides your book, to learn a little bit more and just kind of take those next steps?
So I mean, I think the biggest takeaway is that the Power Platform's for everybody.
Yep.
that's really, I think the Power Platform and especially generative AI enablement is for everybody at some level. You don't have to be a professional to get pretty good results. And like I said earlier, sometimes pretty good is good enough. And I think that for professional developers, the same thing is true. That like Sean said, we've all said, that rapid prototyping and enablement and rapid solution delivery. Again, getting you 80% of an MVP is amazing, especially if you can do it now in a week instead of 6 months.
Yep.
So I think those are probably the biggest takeaways. Is that anybody who has a mind to improve their personal productivity or fix a business process, if they're willing to dedicate a little bit of learning time, can be a hero. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway. I think if you're looking where to go, I think, obviously I've written a couple of books on getting started with the Power Platform. I think those are great places to start personally. But I think I think another really good example though is like browsing the Power Users chat board, the community board.
Yes.
Because you see problems that people are having that they're trying to solve with the Power Platform, and I think that's going to generate those ideas in your head, like, oh, you know what, my business has a similar problem. Maybe I can look at solving it a similar way, and just reading other people's experiences. There are a ton of super helpful people there that spend their entire day trying to help those less experienced walk through, troubleshoot, and refine their apps and flows.
Yeah.
I think that's probably that's a great resource. There are a number of prominent YouTubers that also generate, a lot of business type solutions or scenarios. And again, they might not be fully featured end-to-end solutions, but considering everybody's particular use cases are different, I think that, again, it's enough for some idea fuel to say, they're doing something like this. If I just tweak it a little bit, I can make that apply to my, to my environment. And walking through those, there are a number of really great YouTubers that, that put together content on a pretty regular basis, showing business problems that they've encountered And that's a lot of what my books are business problems that I've encountered. That's what my blogs are business problems that I have encountered, and trying to figure out how they can apply to other things or other people. And there are a lot of people like that out there providing amazing content. So that's right. That's
Use
right.
case workshops. They're fun. And, to get the look in the eyes, wait, we can do this? This is possible? It's one of the best feelings in consulting, is helping somebody realize what was impossible. It is not only possible, but practical with technology.
For sure.
And then for those that may be listening to the podcast, whether live or whether or not you're going to check out this video, say after the fact, I will put Aaron's contact information below as far as where you can find him on LinkedIn, where you can find us on LinkedIn, as well as a link to Amazon for this book that we're talking about today. And if you have any other information, Aaron, like a personal website or a website, let me know, and we'll go ahead and we'll make sure that we'll post that information. Any final questions for Aaron, Sean, as we're wrapping up?
No,
top of the hour.
It's been great talking to you. And again, these technologies, as they're evolving, are really helping us deliver whole new experiences and making it easier for people to be more digital.
Yeah, well, I super appreciate you guys having me on today. It was, I love talking about this thing. This stuff is really exciting to me. And I hope we get to do it again sometime.
That sounds great. We look forward to it. I know you got plenty of books in the work too, so maybe we can interview you about some of those items that comes up, because I know you just had I think there was a Azure 900 certification.
Yep, the AI 900 book. So a little bit of a pivot. So if you are exploring maybe Microsoft certification and you're interested in AI technologies, the Azure platform has a huge wealth of services, whether it's machine learning services or cognitive services. Actually, we use some of the Azure cognitive services in this book. So if you're interested in that, I also published at the same time a book on the AI 900 exam.
Excellent. Well, definitely look forward to that, and we'll have to check that out. And is that coming out from Packet, or is
same publisher. I co-authored it with actually an Azure MVP, Steve Miles. So there's a lot of super cool stuff on there.
Excellent. Well, everybody, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.